Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel on consciousness, therapy, magic, the occult, everything that I'm interested in. And today, as promised, from the other day, I said that I wanted to do a video on the different therapeutic approaches, because therapy is something I'm really passionate about. And I see so many clients, I've worked with so many different people, and so many of them come to me having gone through the system that's completely broken and being pushed down this sort of cognitive behavioral therapy route, which I'm going to look at a little bit today. But you know that my thoughts on that is that I'm really not that passionate about it. I'm going to highlight a few things in this video, hopefully, that sort of gives me a lot of hope into how therapy is evolving and moving forward, because everything evolves and moves forward. It starts somewhere and then it moves with the times. Nothing should ever really stay stagnant, I don't believe. And it's a bit like in magic, you have the ceremonial magic, the big kind of accumulating all that energy and all the stuff and all the theatrics that they used to do with that. And then came chaos magic and ways to simplify that right down. And in the same way, I think that therapy is kind of heading in a similar direction, and it's really good to see, because there's been so much that's been left out of therapy. And in especially in the West, I talk a lot about how we've been so spiritually cut off, and that is going to reflect in the therapy that we offer people. So yeah, it's not too long, this PowerPoint, but I want to kind of just go through a few things here. I'm going to try and put a lot of links, because I've covered a lot of different topics around this. And I want to put I'm going to try my hardest to put a lot of links to my other work underneath this video. So yeah, I want people to really, really raise their awareness. And, it's sad to me when people go down this CBT route and they think that's all there is, and that's what all therapy is. And to have such a bad experience and then to just be, just not want to engage with it anymore, it's sad. But here we go. That's where we're at. So an exploration of different therapeutic approaches. Oh, I've clicked on the wrong thing. Right. Now, I've got some issues with Sigmund Freud. I don't agree with everything he says, but I think it's important when we're talking about counselling and psychotherapy, which are the same thing, by the way. I'll piss off all the psychotherapists straight away. You're not doing a different job than the counsellors. There's this hierarchy issue within talking therapies, and psychotherapists basically, they see themselves as higher than counsellors, and it's not actually true. Anyway, I digress. So I want to kind of like do a little bit on Freud, because some of his stuff I still like. That a lot of it has moved forward and evolved, as I literally just said. But he did start the movement, and I think it's important to, honour him a bit for that. He was a weird guy, don't get me wrong. He definitely had his own psychological hold-ups. I think I prefer Jung's work is a lot deeper to me, and even Willem Reich and other people that I've given homage to over the years. But just some little bits about, like, he did really get this up and running. And two things. One thing I do really respect him for is that he never wanted therapy to be, well, in the hands of the church. And what he meant by that was, I think before therapy came along, talking therapy, as we know it today, and it has evolved a lot and changed, it was very much in the hands of the church. So you'd go there and you'd do your confession, and they would absolve you of all your sins and all that crap. And he obviously did have a problem with that, and I do respect him for that, because he said that a therapist should be an everyman, an everyday person. He said it should be kept out of religion, which I fully agree, and it should be kept out of medicine, and I fully agree with that as well, because I will put a link underneath to my psychiatry video, because psychiatrists have done so much damage to people through drugs and medications and everything else that's gone on in the past. And, I respect him for that. I do respect him for that. So some little facts about him. He was born on the 6th of May, 1856. For those that are astrologically minded, it would be great if you could do a rundown on his life, because I think that would be fascinating. I'm not very good on astrology. He died 23rd of September 1939, and he was aged 83. I think he died in Britain, actually. And you can go and see his There's a museum up in London. I'd love to go actually, but he was the father of psychoanalysis, what then became counselling and psychotherapy. Um, some of his theories here, I've put the id, ego, and the superego. I've touched on that before. I actually still quite like that. I can relate to that. Although Jung, obviously, he like really expanded on those kind of concepts. He talks about the Oedipus complex, which is interesting. Psychological repression, which I think we're all repressed to a certain degree, mainly because of the superego, and that creates the shadow. I've talked about that before. And he has a theory on psychosexual development. In a nutshell, that's kind of a lot of what his work was. A lot of it's been bettered now and has been taken into different directions. He, yeah, he used his Freudian techniques where he would use. So what he would do, as you can see in that couch there, that is actually his couch. That's a picture of his couch. For some reason, my slideshows flipped screens, but never mind. He would use a technique which I still very much use with people, not in the same way though, is free association. So what he would get people to do is, again, I think like Jung, he was trying to bring the unconscious contents to the conscience. Now that is how therapy works, and when you do that, that's where you make really big leaps, because you're trying to make all that unconscious material conscious, so you know what all these unconscious habits are, and belief systems that we've picked up, especially in the first 7 years, which I've spoke about. Free association he would sit in that green chair there, and he would sit behind the client would lay down and be encouraged to basically just don't suppress anything and just talk about anything that came into their mind as random, and don't hold back, and to get into that sort of trying to mine the unconscious and see what came up. And he would look at links there, and he would probably make some notes, and then they'd look at it with the client and, really analyze what was going on there. Obviously, therapy is not done today. I don't get people to lay on a couch and sit behind them. I think it's become much more humanistic and much more a sort of conversation, rather than that, that. But that's how he worked, and he was very, very interested in dreams, as Jung was, and as, to be honest, I am. And dreams are, yeah, such a personal thing, but obviously the way he perhaps would have worked with dreams might not have been the same as how Jung would have. And dreams are a very, very touchy subject, like it's very, very deep. But yeah, he would work with dreams. He would, because basically he recognised that the unconscious would speak in the dream world, and Jung definitely sort of agreed with him there. They did fall out. I won't go fully into the details, but it's an interesting story, especially if you read Carl Jung's autobiography, which I think is called Memories, Dreams and Reflections. It's a very good book. And he would look at defense mechanisms, so natural defense mechanisms that we all build up, and they become unconscious. Why are we defensive? And that's a great question to ask yourself, actually, is to actually look at that. And I think that's probably doing one part of doing shadow work, is to look at, in any way that you are defensive towards anything, what does that tell you about you? Does it come from a past experience? You might be right to be defensive about certain things, don't get me wrong, but it's just very, very good exploration of the soul. Moving on then. So the three main umbrella approaches of counselling and psychotherapy today are known as psychodynamic, humanistic, and behavioural. I mean, someone was asking me recently, they wanted to get some therapy for their partner, and they were saying, what should I look out for? And I said the one thing you need to look out for is their psychological approach, because each one of these is extremely difficult in and of itself, as I'm going to go on to explain. So you're going to get a different way of working with the person depending on which school of thought they come from. The behavioural stuff I really, really detest, because it's just not deep enough. But we'll go on here. So within the sort of psychodynamic approach, you've got still looking at unconscious processes, so still kind of Freudian in a way. The ego and the superego is still very much considered within that theory. And childhood experiences a lot, and as I put at the bottom there, it's often focused on the past, because they recognise that our sort of formative years, which is very true to be fair, shapes who we become, and obviously that's very important to address. Repression. What are we repressing? Often you talk about sexual repression. He got a little bit too hung up on sex, to be honest. um, but there is actually a good point to that too. But Willem Reich, I think, took that in the correct direction, personally. Then you've got the psychosexual stages. They still use that, I believe. I do not practice psychodynamically. I have a fair bit of psychodynamic knowledge because psychology in the psychodynamic field is very interesting, but I don't practice psychodynamically. They look at ego defenses and often focus on the past. They often, a psychodynamic therapist will often be trained to not be themselves within the relationship. That is very, very different to the way I practice. I practice much more humanistically. I want to be myself within to my clients. I don't want to sort of be just a sound off board, because often psychodynamic therapists are very, very, very cold, or they come across that way because they're not giving you anything of themselves. They're like a sound off board. That works for some people, I'm sure it does, but for many it doesn't. And the reason for that is because they haven't felt that connection. And what we know today, because of research that has been done, is we know that the most important ingredient now to any therapeutic relationship is the relationship. The ability to trust and open up to another person is the ingredient, no matter what school you're coming from, that people really, really resonate with. So that's why I prefer the humanistic approach. The humanistic approach, there's probably more to this than that, but I've kept it fairly simple because I'm bound to miss things in this because this is such a huge, huge subject. You've got client or what's called person-centered therapy. Now, that is how I trained. The diploma that I did was mainly person-centered, which is very much focused on the here and now and trying basically not. I don't have when people come to see me and I'm working very person-centered. I'm interested in them. To me, the biggest thing that the humanistic approach did, and Carl Rogers did, and people before him even, they said that the client is the expert, not the analyst, and that was massively, massively important because I don't know a person inside and out. Only you can really know yourself. However, I could probably guide you to know yourself better, and you have the answers. It's completely more empowering. And that shift, I think, was really, really, really important. A lot of people practice more humanistically today. Psychodynamic is kind of not dying out, but it's definitely sort of in the background now. It's not practiced as much. And the existential school, which is kind of linked to the humanistic, that's very interesting. The search for meaning, and there's lots of other branches of that. I didn't put them all in here, but that in itself, there are elements of that I sometimes use. It depends if the client needs that or wants that. Then you've got the third school. My head's in the way. I'll get my head out of the way in a minute. You've got this is the school that I absolutely hate, and this is the school that they'll push you towards now if you go to the NHS, if you go to the doctors. So you've got cognitive behavioural therapy, which is absolute shit. I literally struggle so hard to see any benefit in it. It's, to me, a client said it to me the other day, and I said the same thing, funny enough, in my video. It's like putting a plaster over a gaping wound. DBT, I can't even remember what that stands for, but it's very, very similar to CBT. They're looking at thoughts. The worrying thing was as well for me, what really, really concerns me is that anyone can become a CBT therapist within 12 weeks. I know that was happening. I don't know if it's still happening, but at one point you could do a 12-week program, roll out this script to people in the hope that they'll get better. It's maddening to me. Thoughts, yeah, it's all based on thoughts. Change your thoughts. I'm trying to think of a really good example, but you might go there really, really upset about something, but they're not interested in the emotion, which is the biggest, most important bit, because the emotion is the energy emotion, which is the spiritual side, which I'm going to go on to say about that. Conditioning, a lot of that went on. Exposure therapy, very, very, very controversial therapy. So basically, exposure therapy is, you're scared to go outside, they'll chuck you outside. Well, not literally, but they will encourage you to literally stand, and actually you're desensitized to it eventually. Does work, but there's safer ways to do that now. Much, much, much safer ways. Aversion therapy, flooding, very, very controversial again. So you're scared of rats, to put you in a room full of rats. And what they're saying is eventually you'll learn to desensitize because your brain can't handle that amount of stress. It's dangerous though, because the spike that you get, there's so many safer ways to do that now. My head's in the way, but I'll try and see yeah, systematic desensitization. They're kind of all interlinked, but that is mainly the approaches that are used in counselling and psychotherapy. And when you actually look at even that small list there, to think that they're only channeling people down the CBT route when all that other stuff is available makes no sense to me at all. And I think the reason for that is because CBT is delivered for between 6 and 8 weeks, and and then that's it. If you then want another dose, you then have to probably wait another 2 years. Humanistic and psychodynamic take longer because it's deeper work. You're working with emotions, you're working with the past. They're not interested in that in CBT. They're just looking at what's your problem in your mind, and they'll just stick a plaster on it. It's terrible. And so many people just hate it. They're also given homework. I mean, if you're in a state of absolute emotional overwhelm, the last thing you want is some prat giving you loads of worksheets to do in the week and then asking you why you haven't done them. That to me is like school. Yeah, anyway, that's basically what we're offered today. And the others you'll have to go private for anyway. You're not going to find a site. You're very, very lucky if you get. Well, you won't get. I don't think you will get humanistic counselling on the NHS. But there you go. These are what I'm going to call the lesser known therapies. Having studied the field for so long, I can bring this in. These are never very, very, very rarely talked about. Although EMDR is becoming a bit more popular now. You've got the body-based therapy, which, as you know, I'm very, very passionate about Wilhelm Reich's work on what he called vegetotherapy. So he noticed he came from Freud, he broke from Freud to notice that these unconscious memories or traumas, which is good because trauma had not been addressed before, were getting stuck in the body. And then he would work with the body to release it. That was a really important shift forward. But no one knows about Wilhelm Reich. All his books were burnt and he died in jail. He also did go on to work with what he called orgone energy. So he kind of also was kind of the pioneer into energy psychology as well, which I think is really interesting. Then you've got bioenergetics, which is Alexander Lowen. Fantastic. His work, I highly recommend. I'm much more passionate about these two fields here. Although I still like my humanistic approach, these two fields I think is much more powerful. Bioenergetics is very, very interesting. So what Alexander Lowen did was he learned from Reich. He did therapy with Reich first, and then he learned from Reich, and he kind of developed his own way to address the body and the mind all together by using the body, stretching, different things that he would do with the body to eliminate trauma, bad experience, blah, 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 blah. Breath work, I mean, a lot of that's becoming very popular now. I've used some of that myself. I've used it with clients. I had Wim Hof's one. I think is very, very good actually. I used to use it quite regularly. It made me feel quite high, and there's a whole science behind that. I'm not going to go into that today, but breath work can be very powerful. Particularly, I had one client that did that Wim Hof meditation with me. We did it in the room together, and it changed his life. He literally walked out of that room a different person. So I've seen massive, massive change with breath work. EMDR is a form of moving your eyes, but it's not just eyes. There's like a tapping protocol that's not to be mixed up with EFT, where you're basically using the eyes to get in touch with the trauma and let it go. It's another trauma release. It's very, very good. I've not had it myself, but I know that it is very successful. And there's a lot of people in the field that are recommending it, so I've got nothing really bad to say about EMDR. I prefer EFT from what I know because it's energy psychology, and I'll go on to talk about that in a minute. Vagus nerve exercises. I've used some of them with people. They're very, very simple to do. You can look up on YouTube how to release trauma by using the vagus nerve. There's certain ways you can move your head and eyes, which triggers this vagus nerve to release any tension, and they're brilliant. They're so simple. Somatic experiencing, I think Peter Levine is the guy you want to think about there. He did some amazing work on that. What he noticed with animals is that when they went through a traumatic experience, they would shake just like we do. And what he was saying is that shaking is actually them trying to discharge that trauma, and then they would crack on with their lives. And he did this whole kind of, he does his own different ways of using the body. Again, we're getting closer and closer to actual healing now. Rolfing, I don't know a lot about rolfing. I do have a book on it. I've not read it. It's all to do with how your body is in space again, so it's body based. But this is a really, I think this is a progression. Feldenkrais, I don't know nothing about Feldenkrais. I'm just putting them there. Primal scream therapy, I know a bit about. That's like, you know, using the scream and getting that energy out of the system. So it's linked to energy psychology. I think it was these things are linked, definitely, but I think body-based therapy is very, very good. I've used some of it myself. I've got a really good book on Reiki and breath work, actually, that I've done a little bit on, and it's very powerful. Now, the field that I absolutely adore is this. Now, this is where things are emerging. Things are transforming towards energy now, which is brilliant to see, because finally the spiritual side is being addressed. Because I think a trauma is a spiritual scar. I've said it for years. And when you can work with energy, you can repair it. You can let it go. You don't get rid of the memory, but you get rid of the emotional attachment to it. EFT, I've done loads of videos on EFT, TFT, and something that Jerry Marzinski uses, and I really like his work, I highly recommend it. He uses the Mace Energy Method, which I've got the book for and haven't read yet, but I do understand kind of how it works, and I think it's very, very similar to what we're doing in EFT. There are other energy psychologies, but I just didn't want this list to go on forever. So these are what I call the lesser known therapies. You will not get EFT on the NHS, no way, and that's sad, because they would actually save themselves money, because people would be able to, in 6 or 8 sessions of EFT compared to CBT, you would get a remarkable difference. So, but there we are, that's where we're at. And it really does relate to this human triad that there are symbols for all over the world. That one's a very, very, very famous one, the Triskele, Newgrange. And, you know, because the human is a triad of mind, body, and spirit. The mind is the psychology, the body is the physiology, and the spirit is the energy. So when we're talking about energy psychology now, I can offer the good thing about what I'm offering now to people is that it's a mix. I've got the psychological knowledge, yes. I've got I know some body work stuff, and the best thing I think is the EFT, because it addresses the energy. Finally, I think therapy is moving in the right direction. And as I've put there, the main problem with modern day counselling and psychotherapy is that for years it has left out the spiritual component or the energy body. Really important. And even in my magical work, you know, getting another tip that I give people, and I think this is really, really important, is get in touch with your ancestral spiritual nature. I think that's really, really, to me, has been massively beneficial. I think I've got one more slide. And that's it, is it? Yeah. So just to go back on the 3 main umbrella approaches, you can see what the problem is, can't you? That all of these methods only address the mind. So the 3 talking therapies that are offered, and they're not even offered anyway because you can't get them, access them, are only addressing the mind. They're missing the body and the spirit, the energy. So I really, really, really did want to do this video just to clear that up. And like I said, I'll put some links below. My EFT stuff, I've touched on this. I've touched the subconscious mind stuff. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that one, and yeah, see you in the next one, guys.